Want a huge deal on a large pizza? For a very limited time at Donato's, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. Yes, half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's. Gotta love more.
The Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brandon Matisse says, give me the rock. Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. No fooling. Today is Wednesday, April 1st, 2026, and it's my official duty to welcome you into episode 549 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome to our second podcast in 3 days. Will we hit 550 by the end of the week? At this point, we'll see. It's that time of year. As I mentioned when I recorded on Monday morning, and we broke down the news that Devin Royal was planning to enter the transfer portal. Pretty sure I said that morning, I'll be back soon. Not sure when. We'll see when it makes sense. These things, everything's very fluid this time of year, and before you know it, there's going to be plenty to talk about, so we'll kind of play it by ear. And here we are Wednesday morning. It's been a busy 48 hours. I feel like I have not really left my computer since we last spoke. It's been a lot, and that's what this time of year is, and the transfer portal isn't even officially open yet. The big news, big headlines, we're going to get into each one of these here to some degree and try to keep this at a relatively manageable listen. But shortly after the news, or after our Monday morning podcast, Amare Bynum announced his return to Ohio State for his sophomore season. The next day, Tuesday, John Mobley Jr. announced that if he returns to college, it will be to Ohio State, but he is going to test the NBA draft waters. Later Tuesday afternoon, got word that Ohio State associate head coach Joel Justice will be leaving the Buckeyes to go take a job at Vanderbilt, where he will be reunited with a longtime friend of Mark Bynum. Excuse me, I'm blanking on Mark Byington. Excuse me, too many names in my head right now. So he's joining that coaching staff, creating an opening on Jake Diebler's coaching staff. And then Tuesday night, we had the McDonald's All-American game with Ohio State's Anthony Thompson playing in that game. First time in my 11 seasons on the beat for the Dispatch having to watch that game. Kind of wild to think about. So we're going to talk about each one of those things and a little bit of a look into what might be next as we continue here into the offseason. And we're going to dive right into it here in just a second. Before we do, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks to everyone who's taking the time to do all those things. Donato's is legendary for putting so many toppings on their pizzas, but just wait till you hear what they're taking off. For a very limited time, when you buy any large Donato's pizza, you can add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. That's right, half off. You order using promo code HALF. Order your favorite large Donato's pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off today. Donato's, gotta love more. All right, so we're going to work in chronological order today. And so that means we'll start with Amare Bynum. And I think the first thing is the notion of, was there reason to worry? How much did any of us really think that Amare Bynum could be headed elsewhere next season? And that's the unfortunate reality of this era of college basketball, is that you think you know, but you just don't. Nobody really, I think, has a great feeling until the transfer portal is closed and everybody is either in or out. I think that's when you can first sort of take stock, collect your breath, and say, okay, we know we have these X number of players. Now where are things headed? So when Amare Bynum came to Ohio State, when he committed to Ohio State, he was a fringe top 100 recruit. He jumped up the recruiting rankings during his senior season at Link Academy. Probably would have jumped even higher if not for an injury that cost him a portion of the season and kind of kept him off the radar a little bit. But I think anytime you have a kid who is from the vicinity of another Big Ten school, he's from Omaha, played at a prep academy, in Missouri. There's always like this isn't a reflection on Amare Bynum. This is just a reflection on the college basketball ecosystem in general. Yes, you worry. And I think that all the stuff that we learned over the course of the season about how connected Amare Bynum was to the program and how much he really loved being at Ohio State, his relationship with Jake Diebler, like all the comparisons to Bruce Thornton as a freshman, like all that stuff was very real. And in the past would be an immediate, like, man, this guy's ticketed for big things next year. Like Roddy Gale was 1,000% like in until he wasn't. And Felix Okpara was officially back until he wasn't. Like, there's always reason to worry. So with all of that said, at no point during the course of this season did I ever get any indication from anybody that there was real concern that Amare wouldn't be back, that he was 2 feet in at Ohio State. That wasn't going to change. Every family situation is different. Every player situation is different. Does any of that preclude School X from just throwing crazy amounts of money at a player and then that player changes their mind because it's life-changing money? And that, like, no, that's always on the table these days. So there was always, I think, not because of Amare, but just because of the system, there was always a little bit of reason to worry. However, internally, there was never any real worry that Amare was leaving. And here's what he told me about his decision to stay. He said, quote, "The coaching staff believed in me during the season as a freshman. So why not come back to get better this offseason as a sophomore and get prepared for a great season with the guys that stuck with me since the beginning?" I mean, makes sense. So I wrote a couple of takeaways, a couple of quick thoughts on the Devin Royal decision, Bynum's decision, Mobley's decision. And one of the things that I got into in that, which I'd encourage you to please go click on, is that it does really feel like Amare's a guy you can very easily look at the way his season went and say, yeah, that dude's going to have a breakout year next year. Like a guy who goes from not getting any preseason consideration last year to like, is he going to be like second or third teamish all Big Ten next year? Like, is he going to be one of the 25 best players in the Big Ten? Like, I think there's a reasonable case to make for that. Like he looks very much primed to take off. In some ways, it reminds me of like EJ Liddell as a freshman. Like numbers were okay. You saw it come on as the second half of the season progressed, and then he took a massive step as a sophomore. I think some similar things here. And I talked about some of this in the Devin Royal podcast. So in the last 15 games of the season, Devin played 14 of them, 12.6 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Amare, who was also sick for the Michigan State game but did play, was at 10.9 points, 5.1 rebounds. If you just say he didn't play in the Michigan State game because he didn't score, 11.7 points, 5.5 rebounds in the last 15 games. He finishes the 5th leading scorer and 3rd leading rebounder. He scored in double figures in each of Ohio State's, that 4-game win streak that saved the season. He was in double figures in each one of those. And then in the loss to TCU, he had 12 points, team high 9 rebounds. And he looked as impactful in that game as anybody. I would be remiss if I didn't point out his 3-point shooting. And I've got a very loyal listener and reader in Bart Hubbard, who has pointed this out to me. We've had a lot of back and forth about this during the course of the season. But one of the things that he talked about with Amare as a high school prospect was his ability to shoot from the perimeter and how his shooting really could stretch the floor, on top of the fact that he's an unbelievable dunker and all those things. So we didn't really see that until really the back third of the season. So for the first 22 games of the year, Amare was 13 of 51 from 3. That's 25.5%. In the last 12 games of the year, he was 15 for 37. That's 40.5%. And I don't have the full quote in front of me. You should see how massive my unused quote file from the 2025-26 season is. Like it's ridiculous, people. But I meant to search this one up and I forgot. But Diebler made a point somewhere in the last 2-3 weeks about how Amare, you could see him like growing into a more significant high-level contributor, and he was doing it while they were playing their biggest games of the season. That this wasn't like, oh, we're in a bad conference and there's a bunch of beatable, easy. Like it was he was playing. You saw him taking steps while also playing against the most consistently high-level stretch of competition that Ohio State had on its schedule, and that is certainly factored into all of this. There's probably an algorithm somehow that can compute all that, but that just all adds up to like this guy really came on as the year went on and very much does look primed for a breakout year. So I think this was obviously a significant win for Ohio State. When they talked about retention, it started here. And this is to get this deal done and to have him stay out of the transfer portal is it's big time news for Ohio State. So one more quick thing on Devin. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the last podcast, but put my guess down for Texas. So Amare is one critical piece back next year for Ohio State. And like I said, that came just a couple of hours after the last podcast, and that was Monday. So Tuesday afternoon, we got the word that John Mobley Jr. is probably, almost certainly, definitely going to be back. So he put out a statement to Instagram. Here's what it reads. Every day I play basketball at Ohio State, I live my childhood dream. Being a hometown kid, I'm grateful for every opportunity I've had to compete in a Buckeye uniform. Something special is building at Ohio State, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it. After speaking with my family and Coach Diebler, I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to pursue another childhood dream of one day playing in the NBA. Today, I am declaring for the 2026 NBA draft while maintaining my college eligibility. I'm excited to explore this opportunity and make the best decision for my future when the time is right. I will not be entering the transfer portal. If I return to college basketball next season, there will be only one place for me, and that's here in Columbus with Buckeye Nation. Once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye. John Mobley. Okay, so I mean that puts it in pretty black and white. He will be back at Ohio State, presuming that he is not in the NBA. Looking for the date here. He has until it's in May when he has to make a final decision as far as whether he is staying in the draft or not, whether he can maintain his eligibility. Good time to remind everyone that like this used to be the second you declared for the draft, you were gone. And that's not the case anymore. You can go through this process. You get that feedback from NBA evaluators. You get workouts, you meet with teams, you do all those things. And then you make an informed decision. And then you have, you can be invited to the NBA, the G League Combine, the regular Combine. Like all those things are certainly milestones that you can be a part of while you try to make this decision. So this reminds me a bit of Bruce Thornton last year. Like this is exactly to an extent what Ohio State went through as he went through this process. And one of the things that sort of ultimately solidified it for Bruce was that he wasn't invited to either of the combines. He didn't get a G League Elite Combine invite. He didn't get an NBA Combine invite. Certainly, we all remember what happened with Dwayne Washington Jr. And he put his name in the draft. He was probably coming back. He did really well at the G League Combine. Got an invite to the full Combine, and then he didn't come back to Ohio State. One of the many domino effects that helped unravel things for Ohio State during the Holtman era. So when you look around at who are the top prospects in this 2026 draft, which, by the way, is a loaded draft. I admittedly don't follow the NBA super closely. I just don't have enough hours in the day, frankly. But you don't have to follow the league closely to see like how many teams are allegedly tanking to try to get higher draft picks because there is so much high-level talent in this draft. It is a deep draft class. And this is a little bit of a weird needle to thread in this job because I think every player who even is a possibility of going through this process or of getting to the league should do this process as many times as they can. I think this kind of feedback that they get is incredibly valuable and makes all the sense in the world to go through it. And then having said that, Mobley is not among the top 100 draft prospects at ESPN or CBS or The Athletic or any other mock drafts that I can find right now. Now, this stuff can update and, we'll see how things maybe change in the next month. But like, it does not appear right now that there is any sort of real likelihood that he is going to be in the NBA next year. That doesn't mean it can't happen. That doesn't mean that he can't catch it only takes one team to fall in love with you, right? Like we've seen this. So do I expect that John Mobley will be back next season at Ohio State? Yeah, that's where I see this going. And I think that's where everybody involved in the process probably sees it going. That's the overwhelming, most likely scenario in all this is that he's at Ohio State next year. And that's not a criticism on him. And that's not a negative in any way. This feedback is incredibly valuable. This process is incredibly helpful to guys. So that's where this seems to be headed. Like, the announcement on Tuesday doesn't mean that Ohio State is now scrambling to try to sign a John Mobley Jr. replacement in the portal. They're still going to be trying to add a guard. They're going to be trying to add multiple guards, but not to take away from John Mobley's expected role on next year's team. And another thing that really stood out to me as I started kind of diving in a little bit to his first 2 seasons at Ohio State is certainly there's a real chance for some serious legacy stuff if he's a 4-year dude. Like, and that's talking about a senior year when we are just done with a sophomore year, and the junior year is contingent on NBA feedback. Like, who knows? There's a lot that's got to happen before we get to that point. But I did start looking at this yesterday. So through his first 2 seasons, Bruce Thornton had scored 921 points in 70 games. That's an average of 13.2 per game. Bruce did grow his scoring average every year, topping out at 19.9 as a senior. And as an aside, I wish he could have scored like 1 or 2 more points just so that would round to an even 20. Something about my brain prefers seeing 20.0 instead of 19.9. But at any rate, through his first 2 seasons, John Mobley's played in 7 fewer games. He had the wrist injury or the hand injury this season that cost him those 3 games. And Ohio State didn't have any sort of appreciable postseason run in his freshman year. So Bruce played in 70 games first 2 years, Mobley 63. Mobley's only 19 points behind where Bruce was through his first 2 years. He's averaging 14.3 points per game through his first 2 seasons at Ohio State. So certainly he would have to continue to progress in the way that Thornton did, where he basically grew his scoring average by 3 points a game each year, and was in the lineup every single day, minus that 1 migraine he had. So there's a lot that goes into that. But with in a growing role, because without Bruce Thornton next to him, a lot of this team next year is going to be in John Mobley Jr.'s hands. Certainly they want to bring in a impact point guard, but a lot of this is going to be on his shoulders. So it's fair to expect a even bigger, more pronounced role for him next season, which makes me think that it's not inconceivable that after having gone how many years we went in between people setting the all-time scoring records at Ohio State, could Bruce Thornton's record last for 2 years? And could John Mobley Jr. surpass him? Again, we are way early on this, but that's one of the things that's kicking around in my mind, because he has been that effective through 2 years and that prolific through 2 years. And regardless of where he ends up on the all-time scoring list, he is going to be all over the 3-point shooting records. So he's got 174 made threes. That's 2 shy of Mark Loving for 5th place at Ohio State. He's shooting 39.9%, which is tied with Sean Connolly for 5th. And his 97 made threes last year were 4th most in single season program history. Take out those 3 games, or rather add in those 3 games that he missed, and yeah, it could have been wild. So with all that, an offense built around Mobley, Bynum, and Anthony Thompson figures to be pretty explosive, right? And I started thinking about how like all 3 of those guys to some degree probably have some kind of potential NBA future, or at least will be in those conversations. Like that was a talking point as well about Bynum as the season went on. Like, he's a future pro. Like he's going to play in the NBA someday, which got me thinking, will the 2026-27 Ohio State roster have the most potential NBA players since the Buckeyes had Malachi Branham and EJ Liddell together? And how much higher is the ceiling given that one of those players is a projected lottery pick? Something we'll dive more into that when the roster actually gets set. But again, Mobley's decision on the back of Bynum's decision really gives you an idea of why this team next season could be faster, higher tempo, more explosive, like less dribbling, standing. We might see more of the actual pace and things that Jake Diebler has talked about wanting to see, with guys like that running things and being so heavily involved in whatever this offense looks like next year. So moving on to the next thing. So as the news was being finalized and we're kind of dissecting what it means for John Mobley to be testing the NBA draft waters, we got the next domino for the offseason. That came in the form of an adjustment to the coaching staff, where we learned that Joel Justice would be leaving Ohio State to go to Vanderbilt. So certainly this is a significant shakeup to the coaching staff. Joel Justice was heavily involved in Ohio State's offense. He was one of the one of their primary recruiters, was a prominent recruiter in the LJ Smith recruitment. And now he's going to Vanderbilt. So Joel Justice is, not LJ Smith. That came out wrong. So this is, we will see what the impact is on Ohio State's coaching staff and how this shakes things up. There are some rule changes that could be going into effect here in college basketball where all staff members will be allowed to have coaching responsibilities, just not recruiting responsibilities. So that could impact things as well. Like my understanding is that could end up being a scenario where like Terrence Styles can coach if he wants, or, he can help coach during practice. And like, you can have guys on your staff who aren't recruiting, but are good basketball coaches, help with all of that stuff. So that could have an impact on how this ultimately shakes out. And is there another associate head coach? I would imagine there would be. Like, is that an internal promotion? Who comes in from the outside? We are seeing with more regularity, like I think I've seen a couple in just the last few days of like similar to what Dave Dickerson did, where he left a low mid-major head coaching job to come be an assistant at a high major. Like, we're seeing that happen more and more. Could something like that make sense for Ohio State's coaching staff? I would expect that Ohio State's going to look for someone who's like a well-rounded coach. Like, I don't at this point anticipate them looking for, we need to bring in a defense guy or we need to bring an offense guy. I would wager that high-level recruiting is going to be important in that toolbox and the skill set that coach would need to have. And then that's all got to kind of fit into this, like, how do they mesh with the rest of the staff, and how do the responsibilities ultimately all shake out? Who's doing what? So this is kind of a fluid thing. I don't have like names right now, and sometimes some of this stuff will shake out a little bit more like post Final Four, when essentially the whole sport converges on the Final Four and more conversations take place and things move on from there. One thing I can tell you for sure is it will not be John Diebler. That's as I've written and as we've discussed, that's just not possible based on the nepotism laws in Ohio. And he also was retained at Butler. Obviously, Thad Matta retired. Ronald Norred took over, and John was retained on the coaching staff there. So he will remain at Butler. He will not be coming to Ohio State. That is not going to be allowed. So I did get a quote from Joel Justice on his decision to leave. And it's something that he wasn't like, there were some mixed emotions with it when I talked to him. He described it as bittersweet. He said, I love what we've done here and getting the program back to where everyone wants it to be. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in Jake and the staff and the university that this will continue to grow to where Buckeye Nation wants it to be. He was named as one of the 100 most impactful high major assistant coaches during the season. Silver Waves Media compiles a list like that every year. So he was on it, and so was Jamal Walker. And Diebler spoke both about those two in mid-January, talked about how they've helped pave the way. He said, like, on his staff, you've got to work extremely hard and work well with others. Those two guys are great examples of tons of experience, elite recruiters. They're great people. They care a ton. They've helped me personally, as have the rest of the staff. So this is not like there's no bitterness. There's no angry feelings. There's no burned bridges on the way out. This was, Joel has some family that he will be closer to. He's working with someone who he's been friends with for 2+ decades. And just an opportunity that he felt was the right step in his coaching journey. So we'll see where the coaching replacement comes from, what that looks like on Ohio State's coaching staff. I don't necessarily get the sense that this is something that will be addressed immediately, but certainly add it to the pile of things. I'd been told repeatedly that the first priority was to solidify the roster, and then, or at least like figure out who's staying and who's not, and then the coaching situations would present themselves. So that's where we still are at this point on the calendar. Which reminds me that just worth pointing out, like, there's probably going to be more announcements in the next couple of days. We are less than a week from the portal officially opening, and there's still a couple of guys on the roster that you do wonder, like, okay, well, do they stay? Do they go? Like, and I think some decisions impact other guys' decisions, and there's certainly a financial component to all this, and so those conversations are still ongoing. I wouldn't be surprised if we get more here before when the portal opens, but some of this will inevitably stretch into the portal as well. So now for the McDonald's All-American game. Did get to talk to Anthony. They had a virtual press conference the day before the game and wrote about some of his thoughts about playing in the game and his excitement of playing with Amare Bynum next season. He called Bynum a monster and talked about how their skills will fit with each other. You can go read that at dispatch.com. I would encourage you to please do so. But watching the game last night, it was interesting because certainly you see when you watch things like this where there's a ton of high-level talent on the floor that has only been with each other for a couple of days. It was more competitive for a little while than I think a lot of these games typically become, but it wasn't a great game by any means. And Anthony playing on the East team, the East team's guards struggled. There were problems getting the ball across the court, problems getting in any sort of an offense. And so for a guy like Anthony, who's not a primary ball handler, and mostly was just kind of set up in the corner as a catch and shoot option or a drive and kick option or an offensive rebound option, there wasn't a whole lot he could do. So he didn't start, he came off the bench and had an early turnover. He tried to drive into traffic and kind of lost the ball. But then immediately just switched a 3-pointer from the right corner. And they talked about on the broadcast how just effortless his shot was. And then as they were talking about him, he got another opportunity and he rushed that one. You could tell he didn't get his feet set. And he airballed it. And then he didn't play for the entire second quarter. He started the third quarter and scored his only other field goal where he crashed the rim or crashed the offensive boards, came flying in from the right corner, got a rebound, put it back up, scored. He had another time where he crashed from the corner, got the rebound, did not connect on the follow. He blocked a 3-pointer. You could see his length impacting the game in sort of the limited little doses where he was involved. He blocked a 3-pointer. He altered another one. He's 6'9". He has roughly a 7'4" wingspan. Did have another turnover where he kind of got a pass under the basket, but he dropped it out of bounds. Missed another 3 late in the game. So he played for roughly 15 and a half minutes or so. 5 points, 3 rebounds, 1 block, 2 turnovers. He was 1 of 4 from 3. 2 of them were air balls. The other miss looked really good, just didn't fall. Just not the most exciting. I described it as quiet because it reminded me a little bit of watching the Kingdom Summer League and seeing Zed Key play in that, where Zed's running up and down the court as a big man, but those types of settings just aren't really often set up for guys like that to have success. And clearly Anthony's primary responsibilities involved being available for 3-pointers in the corner and then try to get to the glass if you can. When the ball wasn't even getting into an offensive set most of the time, it kind of rendered him and several of his teammates, they're almost afterthoughts. They weren't getting the ball because the ball wasn't making it far enough into the offensive end of the floor. So not a whole lot else really to say about the game. I did look up. So over at 24/7 Sports, Eric Bossy had a little capsules of every player in the All-American game. And this is what he had to say about Anthony Thompson. He said, this is before the game, but he said, straight up, there may not be a better jump shooter from deep in the class than Thompson. On top of his gorgeous jump shot, he's got 6'8" size. He's listed at 6'9", but plus length and the ability to play as either a jumbo wing or a stretch 4 to create mismatches all over the floor. He still needs to get stronger, but it's important to note that he's among the younger players in the class of 2026 and won't turn 18 until he's already been on campus for a few months. He is still he's projected as a lottery pick. I just looked it up on a couple of mock drafts, and I think I saw him 11th on one as far as the 2027 draft goes. So, and he talked about that in the pregame, the press conference we had the day before the game, where he said, he hopes that people look back on his performance in the All-American game when he's an NBA player and say, oh yeah, he was in that game too. That this is one thing they can go back and look on when he's doing well in the NBA. So, that's pretty much all there is to say about the All-American game. This isn't it for OSU signees playing more basketball. Last thing I'll leave you with here is Alex Smith his prolific prep team will play in the 2026 Chipotle Nationals. It takes place in Fishers, Indiana. And prolific prep will open the tournament against Montverde on Thursday at 2 p.m. Game will be on ESPN2. Championship game is Saturday, so win in advance, lose and go home. All right, well, that wraps it up. There's a lot of ground to try to cover. I tried to get to as many of these things as I could and not be here super long, because for all I know, in the 30-odd minutes that I've been talking, 2 more players have announced intentions. So, as always, I just encourage you, just continue to check dispatch.com for the latest. Probably the easiest way to keep up with everything, in all my stories, if you click on my name on our website, it'll take you to a page that just lists everything I've written. So if you're not finding the things that you want to find that I've, if you're trying to figure out, what's the latest basketball, whatever, that's the easiest way I can suggest it to you, because there's not just a men's basketball tab to click on our website. But if you click on my name, that's the easiest way to make sure you find all the stuff I'm putting out there for you. So I'm going to wrap up now and go move on to the next thing. But as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thank you for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty for getting us out there. I'll be back with you soon. I'd say odds are probably by the end of the week again. So stay tuned for more. Until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon. Donato's is legendary for putting so much on their pizzas, but just listen to what they're taking off. Right now, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's, gotta love more.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.